One of the hardest elements of grief to navigate is relationships post-grief. 50% of siblings come apart after the death of a parent. Some of the research says that 80% of relationships come apart after the death of a child. Couples who have miscarried have a 22% higher risk of experiencing a breakup than a couple who experienced a happy live birth. And couples who have experienced a stillbirth, it's estimated have a 40% higher risk of their relationship ending. So relationships and grief are such an important mix. Today we will explore why grief challenges our relationships to the core. I'm Jo McRogers, and I'm a therapist who supports grief through my private therapy practice, through this YouTube channel, and now through my online private membership called the Grievolution Collective. Please like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notifications bell so that YouTube will need to recognize the important work that we are doing here as we do grief differently. I hear all the time in my private therapy practice that grievers of all sources of grief feel disappointed, let down, rejected, angered, and just generally pissed off by those around them who are not supporting their grief well. I've experienced these emotions myself, so please let me know in the comments below if you have also experienced these emotions in regards to the people around you attempting to support your grief. Sometimes the change in the relationships are sudden and they're just blatant, they're black and white. There can be crickets after the funeral. It can be the absence of any more texts or phone calls to support. Judgment can ensue about our need to move on. Someone draws a conclusion about our own grief that just doesn't even begin to match our experience of our own grief. Sometimes the change in relationships are subtle. It's like erosion at the sand dunes. It's like one grain of sand at a time. Casseroles and cards appear, and then fewer and fewer moments of outreach or of invitations to conversations, they dissipate, and then only invitations to distract and divert, and then our failure as a griever, our failure to progress becomes uncomfortable for the other supporters, and then they're gone. As an example, this is my experience. In terms of close relationships, my assumption was they know me the best. They will know, they should know best how to support me. Leads to massive disappointments. In further out relationships, one step removed, my assumption is they will mean well, but they just don't know me well enough in order to know how to support me. So there's still some disappointment, but it comes with some context. And then next, in distant relationships, friends or coworkers or neighbors, my assumption is, thanks, you can't possibly know how to support me, so just go away. I don't need you. And then in future relationships, my assumption is that you just really don't want to know about my pain, or I can't possibly share my pain and be seen and heard and accepted. I need to protect myself. And this then becomes a very limiting belief in terms of future relationships. Can any of you relate to my experience as I've described? Please leave a comment below so that we can know and learn about how and from where you felt abandoned as a griever. It's such a common experience. Let's reduce that isolation. So, why or how does this happen? Here are my humble thoughts. Number one, when I am grieving, I resemble everyone else's greatest fear. My grief is like a billboard for We are not in control. And that is a scary thought. And most people will avoid scary if they can. Number 2, when grieving, we often ask some really deep questions. Why me? How did I find myself in this situation? I'm a good person. How did this happen to me? What is life worth? Or what is life all about? What happens when we die? Is there life after death? Did my higher power not hear my prayers? I feel like I don't want to be here anymore. I think people are afraid that if they follow us down these rabbit holes of questions, that they fear that they may get lost, that they may never come out of that rabbit hole, and they don't have the intensity and the motivation that we do through our grief to seek the answers to these questions. Number 3, when we are grieving, we are all a little bit messy. So when I'm grieving, I may need some ongoing, intense investments of emotional energy and of time. Who knows how many hours it might take to dedicate to support me. People often will find it difficult to make an unknown, ongoing commitment to supporting my grief. And number 4, some friends and family are genuinely afraid of doing harm through their responses, through their words, through their actions. They may feel my pain deeply, and they may also be unable to do or say anything with it because they fear that they will make it worse. While we may be able to recognize that this comes from a place of care, it still feels, our experience as a griever, it still feels like abandonment, judgment, or rejection. And number 5, it's a rule of life. Some relationships are temporary. Some relationships are circumstantial. Life's circumstances change. They change when grief finds us. Relationships will change because the circumstances change. When grieving, our differences can exceed our similarity through circumstances, and then relationships just change. Now, we, the grievers, we also need to own a part of this process as well, because all of this is occurring while our ability as a griever to emotionally regulate, to connect, to remember, to be able to follow through, to maintain focus, and to discern is greatly diminished. So when grieving, our emotional radar is hormonally, chemically, and emotionally impaired. Navigating relationships while grieving becomes a very mixed bag of balancing the clarity that sometimes comes through a grieving heart with the altered brain that grief concocts. I suggest then that when we are grieving, we often need to have the presence of mind to be able to say to ourselves and sometimes out loud to others, this is grief talking. This may not be about our relationship. Saying this might invite in some time and some perspective for us, the grievers, to be able to make decisions about the relationships that surround us. We have just touched today on this element of grief and how relationships are challenged or how they end. Please let me know what I have missed, what your reality has been, and also inform me about what you might like to learn more about, and I will do some research. Leave us your comments below so that we can continue to do grief differently. Exploring this today may not change the pain of your challenged relationships, but my hope today was to be able to offer some perspective and to reduce your sense of isolation that this is only happening to you. So in the challenge of relationships, I send to you kind thoughts, kind words, and a kind heart while you are grieving. If you'd like to learn more about joining our online community, please watch the next short video that I've lined up for you. Thank you and take good care.